Sound check 1, 2, 3, 4.
Good evening. My name is Hank Stevenson. I'm the co-founder of the Arizona Agenda, and I'll be moderating this evening's debate. The Arizona Citizens Clean Election Commission is the sponsor of this event. Clean Elections is the voter education agency and the official sponsor of Arizona debates. Clean Elections wants voters to have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Voters who are watching this debate live, you can submit a question at any time. Do that via email. Send it to debates@kc-a.com, or you can text it in. That's 408-302-1810. Or you can even call it in to 480-937-1253. We may not get to all audience questions, but we will do our best. Tonight, we're diving into Legislative District 4, which covers Central Phoenix, basically between the 51 and the 101 north of Camelback. We're hearing from the Democratic House candidates, Kelly Butler and Karen Gresham. Voters can vote for two candidates in the House. Republican House candidates Matt Gress and Pamela Carter declined to attend, and the district Senate candidates, Republican Karine Werner and Democrat Christine Marsh, were also unable to attend tonight. We remind the candidates and the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may vote informed. All right, and our candidates, you'll have about 2 minutes to give your opening statements to the audience. And Ms. Butler, why don't you take it away and tell the public a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank Citizens Clean Elections for hosting us tonight, and thank you, Hank, for moderating. I am Kelly Butler. I'm an Arizona native, grew up within the boundaries of LD4. My husband, Ben, and I are small business owners of Butler Family Dental. I actually served in the State House for 6 years, representing the old LD28. And then after redistricting, I made the decision to run for an at-large position on the Maricopa County Community College District Governing Board. I won that seat, and I love using the connections that I made at the legislature to support our efforts that are encouraging more young people to pursue post-secondary education and advanced certifications and degrees. And I have to say that I thought I had retired from the legislature, but until my two grandkids were born, and our world changed when the Dobbs decision overturned Roe versus Wade. I knew that there is so much at stake and so much more I can accomplish as a state legislator, particularly if my running mate Karen Gresham and I both win our seats in LD4. If we're able to get to work, we will be protecting reproductive health care, funding public education, and ensuring that our state's economy has the trained workers that we need for the future. I'm so glad to be here tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Gresham?
Thank you, Hank. I'll also go ahead and thank Clean Elections and Hank Stevenson for moderating. I am Karen Gresham, running for the House of Representatives in District 4. And like both my running mates, I grew up here in the district. My family actually goes back 4 generations now in Arizona. So, and then my own kids, when they started school here, I was discovering why their class sizes were so big, why us as parents had to fundraise to have a teacher's aide. We had to pay for full day kindergarten. And so eventually, 4 years ago, I stepped up and ran for and won a seat on the Madison Elementary School District Governing Board, where I am currently serving as the president. I'm also a former CPA, so I know I will be an effective legislator, developing budget priorities, holding state agencies accountable for the spending of our taxpayer dollars. And another issue that's very important to me as a parent and a school board member is school and community safety. So I am certain with a new majority, when Kelly and I get elected, we will finally be able to pass common sense gun safety measures such as a safe storage law. I hope I can count on your vote on or before November 5th. Thanks.
Great. All right. Since you both mentioned your education backgrounds, that seems like a good place to start. And I think one of the top issues on voters' minds every year is about education or empowerment scholarship accounts, school vouchers. And so I think if I were to ask, do you support ESAs as they are in their current form? I'm going to get a resounding no from both of you. Stop me if I'm incorrect. So let's ask who should be allowed to receive ESAs? If Democrats take the majority, as you mentioned, where would you draw that line? How far back would you roll back our current universal voucher program? And why don't we start with you, Ms. Butler?
Oh, thank you. Well, you're right that ESAs are very top of mind for a lot of reasons, and then for our district. And I support, and I know Karen Gresham also supports the original intended recipients of the program, the children who have special needs that were not being met in their public schools, children that were at DNF schools, and there were military families. There were a few expansions of the program that made sense in this school choice environment, and so I think that we obviously need to protect the program for those students. And then it's going to be really interesting and difficult because, we understand that families in our district may have made decisions about their children's educational future based on the ESA program. They may have decided to go to a school that they might not have felt that they could afford before. So I think we just really need to be very mindful of how we can look at the program and make sure that the recipients are children who need the program, who are doing well with the program. We've all seen the headlines about, people purchasing kayaks and espresso machines and ski passes. And I think that what we need to do to rein in the program initially is to look at those types of uses, which don't rise to the level of being, valuable educational purchases with our tax dollars. And I appreciate, for example, Attorney General Chris Mays is asking whether the Department of Education should be more mindful that making sure that the dollars are being spent for legitimate expenses. So I believe that we should be getting a handle on those types of expenses, and we should do that first and initially. There are other states have many more. We blew the roof off of this thing and applied it, allowed any student to have it, but we didn't apply any guardrails. And many other states do have some thoughtful measures to make sure that students are achieving when they're using them. Many states require achievement testing. We have no idea if the students in Arizona who are using the ESA program even are learning anything valuable under the program. Student safety is so important. I mean, Senator Marsh sponsored a bill to just require not only fingerprinting of people in private settings, but also checking the fingerprints through the database at the Department of Public Safety, I think. But that bill couldn't even pass. So what I think is really important for voters to understand is that while we want to make sure that those dollars are being responsibly used to educate our children, the Republicans have been unwilling to make any changes whatsoever. They have seen the headlines that we have seen. They know that there's, 340 million just being saved that is unavailable to our public schools now. And they just are unwilling to act. And I think that we need to be very mindful of and careful about how we rein in and apply guide rails. But I think that the taxpayers deserve for us to be more careful with those uses of our tax dollars.
Okay. And Ms. Gresham, I want to get to you too, but let me ask a follow-up, Ms. Butler. It sounded to me like you were saying at first you support rolling it back to pre-universal levels. And then I thought you made an interesting point about we have a lot of families who have now made decisions about what they are doing for their children's future. They have put them in schools. They expect those ESAs to be there. And then we kind of pivoted to talking about guardrails and ensuring that whatever we do spend is used appropriately. So I want to drill down on that just a little bit. If the Democrats do take the majority, would you support a repeal of the universal voucher expansion?
If we are, when we take the majority, and thank you, because there are a lot of questions and there are a lot of barriers to trying to, figure out exactly what are the correct and reasonable paths forward. I think Governor Hobbs put together, some proposals that we would need to work through, and we should work through, including whether students, we should return to the standard that you had to have 90 days in a public school before you are a voucher recipient. I think that we should Gosh, I'm trying to think. I'm what's sad about this program is that the Democrats had a lot of ideas in the last legislative session that should have been debated and discussed. There were a lot of again, the program is way spending way more money than was budgeted and allocated for. It's obviously a cause of our budget deficit, and we need to get a much better handle on how these dollars are being spent. So I would look to the governor's leadership and to the things that the caucus has investigated and explored, and then we need to have really robust debate about what are the best ways to begin to rein it in. But we are sensitive to families who have made those decisions for their family. So I'm really not 100%, because we haven't had those broader discussions, because unfortunately the Republicans in the legislature haven't allowed those broader discussions. There is a problem. We need to fix it. We need to be careful about doing so. And we need really robust debate with all of our education stakeholders and parents and families at the table.
Okay. Ms. Gresham, do you agree there's a problem? And if so, how would you go about fixing it? Is it a simple repeal? Is it guardrails? Is it maybe putting in some sort of test on you have to have attended a public school before transferring over? How do we draw that line?
Thank you, Hank. Yes, I want to make clear and repeat what Kelly mentioned, that we would never take away the original recipients of these ESAs, and that has never been the goal. And so that is not in our interests. But we do need to ensure that our taxpayer dollars are being spent appropriately. And this program was completely unbudgeted, and it's unsustainable for our state. And now that we're in this huge deficit. But there are no accountability, no transparency measures. And Arizona is actually the only state that has done this expansion with no guardrails at all. So there's a lot of things that we could do. And the fact is that the vast majority of the expansion population already attended private school, and we're already paying for that. So now we're just subsidizing those private schools, and they're raising tuition on top of that. So Arizona already has and has always had the most school choice in the country. So we just need to help pass measures that help our parents and our students, regardless of the choice they make. Senator Marsh, as Kelly mentioned, there's been multiple bills that they've tried to pass, like the fingerprinting, even one that said, you'd have to notify these students, because a student with special needs or IEPs and disabilities, they give up their rights when they attend private school. So even if a private school allows them to attend, which a lot of times they don't, they give up all their federal protections. So there was a bill for that that couldn't get heard. So yeah, there are a lot of things we could do, but we have to make sure that students are safe and that they are learning. And I think they should have to, if they're accepting public tax dollars, they should have to, go by the same guidelines that public schools do. And the Grand Canyon Institute just revealed that there's $340 million just sitting unused, which would go a long ways towards our public education. And there's people, it was in the news the other day that there's parents that are wanting to buy a curriculum that teaches that the Earth is flat. So these kind of things are not what we need for our students, and so that there's definitely multiple ways we could do that. Even if we don't repeal the whole thing, there's a lot of ways we can at least hold it accountable and keep it sustainable for our states.
Okay. And I think I understood clearly that, you're not talking, none of the Democrats are really talking about eliminating school vouchers for those original populations. If it was put before you a repeal of the universal voucher, though, how would you vote?
Of the expansion program?
Yeah.
I think it has to be a piecemeal plan. I think, as Kelly mentioned, Governor Hobbs has a lot of good ideas, and so those are the kinds of things that I would vote for. Okay,
little by little, it sounds like it's hard to put those things back in the box.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Arizona Abortion Access Initiative. This is another one where, with only Democrats in the room, I don't think I have to ask how you feel about that initiative, but take a moment to explain to the voters why you feel that way, if you would. Like how you're going to vote and what that means to you, why this is important to you. And Ms. Gresham, why don't you start us off?
Okay, thank you. I am definitely proud to support the initiative, the Prop 139. In fact, I helped collect signatures and I notarized petitions to get it on the ballot. I've been a volunteer for Planned Parenthood for many years. And so this is important. This is going to be a huge issue on our ballot this year. We have a current abortion ban here in Arizona. Actually, our opponent has gone on record of supporting it, even though it has no exceptions for rape or incest. There's an arbitrary timeline. So we need to go back, and what this proposition will do is return us to the standards under Roe versus Wade. So before the Dobbs decision. But, we need to trust women to make the right decision on what to do with their own bodies. Every pregnancy is unique, and those decisions should remain between the patient and their medical providers. They're not politicians and no business.
How about you, Ms. Butler?
Oh, thank you. Yes. Well, I like Karen Gresham. I agree that we need to pass the Arizona abortion access measure on the ballot. It just returns us to the standards that were in place under Roe versus Wade before all of this chaos was taking place, where, women were just in dire straits. And I know that women in our district don't want the government in their doctor's offices. They don't want the government taking away their freedom to make their healthcare choices. So, but it is, it's a very important that people really, look into this and understand that the 15-week is just an arbitrary time frame, and as Karen said, it doesn't have, exceptions for rape or incest past there. It doesn't take in the complexity of pregnancy, that things can happen at any stage in the pregnancy, and you can get testing done that might reveal a fetal anomaly after 15 weeks. So I had 2 miscarriages, and one needed an emergency D&C. So I understand that these services need to be available to people, and it is not right for the government to take that away. It is important. I think that our opponent isn't here Matt Gress is not here to talk about his record, but I want to share that I'm very concerned that he is saying one thing and he is doing another. So what he, on his first legislative session, he actually sponsored 5 different bills that would have worked to establish fetal personhood into Arizona law. And fetal personhood is where it's this kind of backdoor way of establishing the belief that life begins at the moment of conception. And if his bills had become law, 2 made it through the process and were vetoed, but if his bills had become law, it would have ended any right to abortion, including any abortion necessitated by a rape or an incest situation. So no abortion, and he would have no IVF could occur if his bills passed, and also it would have limited some types of birth control from being used. So not only he has this record of sponsoring these 5 really dangerous pieces of legislation, he also celebrated when Roe versus Wade fell and the Dobbs decision came down, and he actually voted against protecting access to contraception in a vote that took place in the state house. So he is just kind of all over the map, and I think that this is such an important and really a life or death issue. We need to know where he stands, and he's not here to answer those questions.
Can I add something real quick to that, Hank?
Please, go ahead.
I just want to mention that even when this bill passes, we still have laws in Arizona restricting abortion before the Dobbs decision. So when it was Roe versus Wade, we had a lot of waiting periods and mandatory ultrasounds and things like that. So it is still important that we have a majority that will repeal those laws and support the initiative. So just wanted to add that.
Okay. Let's move on to a little bit about housing. I want to ask specifically about Airbnbs because I know that is kind of a big issue in the LD4 area. But first, let's just start generally. What is your plan if elected? What can you do as a state legislator to improve housing affordability in this state? Oh, I'm sorry. Whoever wants to take this one first.
So I can start, I guess, and then I'll let Kelly finish. But I'm glad you mentioned the short-term rentals, the Airbnbs. But this is a huge issue in our state. There needs to be multiple ways of dealing with it. Multiple stakeholders need to be involved. But yes, a big thing, especially in our district, is the short-term rentals. So, and that's part of the cause of this shortage of affordable housing that we're dealing with. And those are a problem not only because, they can become party houses and become a problem for the neighborhoods, which, the police, it's hard to, on the police departments to deal with that. But they're causing the housing market to skyrocket, and then it's also jacking up the rental rates. And most of these short-term rentals now are owned by giant investment firms. So there's an organization called Private Equity Stakeholder Project, and the percentage of homes purchased by these investors between 2018 and 2022 increased 78%. So this is a huge trend we're seeing, and it's causing a big problem. And these equity firms are also buying apartment buildings, and then they immediately increase the rent on the tenants much higher than what the market, should call for. And our Attorney General, our current Attorney General Chris Mays, filed a lawsuit because we had some apartment buildings that were, colluding on rental prices. And this lawsuit says that these companies conspired to raise the rental rates. And so I'm glad that she's working on that piece to protect our consumers. But we need to agree and pass several measures that to mitigate this crisis. It is a crisis right now, and people deserve to have a roof over their heads, and that won't cost them their entire paycheck.
So what kind of measures, though? What kind of policies can we enact either to deal with the short-term rental issue specifically? Because I doubt anyone's saying let's just ban short-term rentals outright. But what can we do to restrict them or rein them into a reasonable level? Or more broadly about housing, broader housing policy, if the answer is not putting some sort of restrictions on short-term rentals, how can we either get more supply into the market or bring down prices? What can you do as a state legislator?
Yes, so there are things we can do. Actually, one thing we can do is return control to our cities and local governments, because right now the legislature passed several years ago a bill that said cities cannot do anything about these short-term rentals. So their hands are tied. It loosened up a little bit a couple sessions ago, but there's still very little that they can do. So one thing we can do is stop the overreach of the state from preventing the cities from actually handling this in their own communities, because cities know what's going on there, and they need to be able to handle it. So that's one thing that we should definitely look at.
Okay, Ms. Butler, your thoughts?
Gosh, well, Karen had such a comprehensive answer and really hit on a lot of things. And when it comes to short-term rentals, I think we have a huge number in our district in LD4. And in fact, I hear we have one of the highest numbers of short-term rentals in the entire state in our district. And so we've just had neighborhoods that are taken over by, and every short-term rental and every operator of a short-term rental is not bad. Some of them, though, are operating really party houses. And so you talk to neighbors, there's a lot of neighborhoods in our district that have these homes not hotels signs where they have a bad actor, and there's no ability for the city to really get control of that situation because of the preemption type laws that the state enacted that Karen talked about, not allowing the cities to really have control of the situation. So, I mean, neighbors talk about a lack of safety. People are running around having parties in their neighborhood, and these are where they're raising their children. We know that calls to police are a lot higher often at short-term rentals. So I think we need to get a handle on allowing the cities to make sure that the people who are operating those are good actors. There's a lot of proposals have been put place, but again, the Republicans who put the original preemption law in place are unwilling to really take a big step forward to let our communities take control and create a more safe environment. So I think that, you know, unless we take the majority, the Republicans have had years of they know that our neighborhoods are struggling with this and they have not fixed it. We will seek solutions that will help our neighbors and give, you know, back the local control. There are, you know, and it's not going to change, and it's a really bad situation. It's getting worse. You know, there's huge like cul-de-sacs full of people where, you know, there's a party house there, and the rest of their, you know, their peace and safety of their neighborhood is being really, really damaged.
I can.
Well, that actually,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Can I just add, because Kelly mentioned the safety piece, and I just wanted to bring up, because over the summer, there were actually at these short-term rentals, there were 2 child drownings in 1 week, in the same week. So I don't know about the rest of the summer, but so this is a safety situation, and it's hurting our communities.
Well, and that brought up an interesting question. I think you both had mentioned kind of the preemption laws that the Republican majority has put into place. Brings me to another interesting housing policy discussion, which is the idea that cities should be preempted from the kind of restrictive zoning laws that they currently have. Like, one of the solutions that has been presented at the Capitol a few times in a few different ways to deal with the housing shortage, housing crisis, is essentially allowing more building of more kinds of property in more places against the will of cities or city code in a lot of cases. And the solution proposed has been a state preemptive law saying, you know, this is a statewide issue of statewide importance. And so cities may not restrict X, Y, and Z from happening within single family zoned areas. I don't want to get too nerdy on this one, but is that the right approach? Should we be in some places saying more local control and in some places saying less local control? What do you both think about that idea as a solution to our housing shortage? And Ms. Butler, why don't you take this one? I think.
Sure, I'll jump in. You know, I wasn't at the legislature when, you know, this meaningful kind of thing, these measures were moving. When I was there, we were really struggling to figure out, or the Republican majority was struggling to figure out what to put on the board to try and address this. I don't agree with the state mandating things like zoning. I think that has to be local control, because, you know, the solutions that Scottsdale might come up with are going to be totally different than what Sedona thinks is the right thing to do. I know that our communities and our local cities and towns want to be at the table addressing homelessness. I know they care about affordable housing, but I don't think that the state mandating solutions that may not fit our local communities is the right approach. It just creates more problems than it causes, or than it solves. Sorry.
Okay, fair enough. Ms. Gresham?
Yes, so of course I agree with Kelly. And the other thing I want to bring up was that we had a package of this of solutions passed, and one of them was you know, that cities could allow these, you know, casitas being built to help this situation. But then they didn't put any limits on whether you could have short-term rentals there. So now our residents are not happy still, because actually Phoenix and Scottsdale, you could already have those in your backyard. But now there's no limits on the short-term rentals. So I've talked to several people at their door about that as well. But yes, the cities, they do need to step up, and they do know what's best for their communities, but they do need to step up, and it needs to be, like I said, multiple stakeholders and multiple approaches to this.
Wait, I don't think I understood that. I understood what you're saying, but I didn't think I understood that. Does this state law now override cities' ability to restrict casitas or ADUs from becoming short-term rentals?
No, there's no restriction on those. So you can, they created, the law says that you need to make it easier, and you need to allow these casitas to be built, but no restrictions on who you rent it to or what you do with it.
And you're saying that Phoenix and Scottsdale previously had restrictions on building and then using?
No,
as
they didn't have. You could already have an advocacy
okay.
before
Gotcha.
this bill, and so now it's kind of making the problem worse, actually.
Okay, I understand. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, let's move on a little. This is a great question from the audience that I always like asking. Essentially, do you think it's your job to work with people across the aisle? And what in your background, lends itself to that kind of work, if anything? How do you treat people from across the aisle? How do you work with people you strongly disagree with? And let's start with you, Ms. Gresham.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so I serve on a school board, a public school board, and of course those positions are nonpartisan. So I work with my school board members all the time, and we do what's best for our district and for our students. And that's been a really, really rewarding experience. So that's what I can bring to this table is the nonpartisan aspects of that job. The other thing I would say is that we represent our entire district when we're elected, and we actually have many more Republicans than Democrats in our district, and a lot of independents. And I will represent all of them in their interests.
But how do you do that? How do you get along with people you strongly disagree with? People who are just wrong, because there are going to be people at the Capitol who, from your point of view, are just wrong. Like, do you shy away from them? Do you try to find people you work with? Do you power through it and try to find agreement with people you just fundamentally disagree with? I think that a little bit about your thinking and your approach goes a long way with voters kind of understanding how you'll navigate problems, because it's not so much the answers to the questions. It's kind of how you work as a person. Lawmaking is a lot more than voting yes or no a lot of times, It's those relationships.
Yes, and it's tricky and it will be hard. And I obviously have not served in the legislature before, so I can't say exactly what I would do, but we will need to work together. And if we're tied in the legislature or we have a slight majority, we'll need to work together. And then that's when the best ideas come together, is when we compromise and work together. And that's honestly just not happening right now in our legislature. Any bills from Democrats just rarely get heard at all. And so, if we do get the majority, we wouldn't be like that. We wouldn't let that happen. If it's a good idea, if it's a good bill, we'll hear it, we'll vote on it. So that's what I would hope to.
How many bills did you have signed into law during your 6 years at the Capitol? Former representative?
One.
One.
Well, and I would love to speak to this because, being in the legislature from the outside and it looks very divisive, and in committee meetings when there is a bill and you need to make sure that people understand, aspects of it that you disagree with, that it can look really contentious. Behind the scenes, I feel like I got along very well with my colleagues. I respected them. I respected their decisions. I mean, there were some people that disagreed with things that I thought, but at the end of the day, it's a workplace, and you need to work professionally. You need to find common ground, and I will reiterate what Karen Gresham said. I'm also on the governing board of the Maricopa Community College System. It's a diverse group of people, and we are just focused on trying to do the right thing for our students. And that is, I think, is what we will do in a tie or in a majority in the legislature, is look at what is the right thing to do for people in Arizona, for our communities. I'm not interested, I really want to get down there and value the input and the opportunity to compromise and create legislation that's meaningful, and that can only be, it's bipartisan. It needs to be bipartisan, and especially from our district where we represent, there's a lot more Republicans than Democrats in our district, and they're looking to us to find the common ground and the compromise. And I think we will absolutely do that.
And if you're in the majority, you're not going to hold it against the Republicans that they only let one of your probably 100 bills that you filed in that time through?
My bills were amazing. Well, you know what? You can't. What I am interested in doing is moving our state forward. I'm interested in finding solutions. And, there are really smart people on the other side of the aisle, and they might have different approaches to things. And I'm looking forward to whether we're in the minority or we're not going to be in the minority, whether we have a tie or we're in the majority, to be talking about what we can agree on. Maybe we could limit some of the more irrational things that get moving down there, and we can just have serious discussions about meaningful solutions. The Republicans have been in charge for decades, and in charge of the House since the 60s. It is time for a change. It's time to give us an opportunity to show how we can lead. We've already demonstrated it in our communities and in our capacity on governing boards, for example.
How about just eliminating partisan primaries? What I want to ask how you're both going to vote on the Make Elections Fair Act, which would essentially eliminate partisan primaries. The idea is that will be one tool to weed out some of the extremists on either side of the aisle, by forcing in blood red Republican districts, essentially Republicans to run against Republicans in a general election, and same for very liberal Democratic districts. How will both of you vote on that? And why?
Well, I'll take this one at first, and my answer is I haven't quite decided yet. I do agree. I know that the people who are running running the initiative and working on this issue truly have the best interests of Arizona at heart, and they want to find a solution to the partisanship that's down there. I am troubled though about the part that gives the legislature some maybe more power than they have earned or have recently shown themselves to be able to use in a way that is nonpartisan. So I'm not sure that it's crafted as carefully as I would like. But I'm glad that it's on the ballot, and I'm glad that we'll have an opportunity to hear from voters and find out how they truly feel about it.
Okay, but not sure how you're going to vote yourself yet, huh?
I really haven't. That's when people at the doors really aren't talking about that. So the things that we're talking about, are our public education at the doors. So I haven't had the time to truly, really look into it and study it. I've met with and heard from the folks who are running it, and I do believe that they are sincerely trying to seek a good solution. I'm just not sure that this is carefully crafted enough.
Okay, and how about you, Miss Gresham?
So I'm also not totally convinced on this bill. Again, there's some flaws in it, and I really wish it had been a simpler bill, which I would support. And we are, this is what's happening in our state, is that the very extreme, the far right are getting winning their primaries, and we're losing a lot of our moderate people in our legislature, which is a shame. And again, the Republicans have had a majority since the 1960s, which for 60 years now, and I just don't think that's good for democracy in general. So no other bills can get heard, and no other side can be heard. And so there are good points to this bill. We actually had both sides present at our last legislative district meeting. So that was very interesting. And there's good points to both of it. I would love to vote for it, and I might, but I'm not sure yet either because of some of those sticking points that Kelly mentioned.
Okay. Plug for clean elections. There was a great clean elections debate about this one recently. Okay, we're getting close to our time limit, but I do want to hit just a few more things. I don't think I have to ask either of you how you're voting on Proposition 314, which is Democrats will call it SB 1070 2.0. It is a piece of legislation that would make it a crime to be in the state, make it a state crime to be in the state illegally, and force local law enforcement to enforce that. I think you're both going to vote no, but I'd like to hear a little bit about your thinking about why you're voting no and what you as a lawmaker can do, if not this, to ensure that we do have a secure, safe border between Arizona and Mexico. And I can't remember who I started with last time, but whoever went first, pass it to the other.
Want me to go? I'll go ahead and start. Okay, so first I just want to acknowledge we definitely have a problem at our border, and but this is not the solution, this proposition. I do not support it. Well, I want to be clear about that. It's opposed by our business community, our chambers of commerce, even our border communities are against this, law enforcement. So what we need to do is truly support the border communities and our ports of entry. We need to, they've asked for new technology, such as cameras and drones. So we definitely need to secure our ports of entry. But, this bill, as you mentioned, Hank, it's just another version of SB 1070. And that bill caused a huge black eye on our state. And we had boycotts of businesses, small businesses, and it hurt our economy. So because of the boycotts, this is not the solution. And I want to add that this also affects the students in our schools because, like 1070, when students and their families are worried about being deported, they stay home, and then these students stop coming to school, and that's the last thing we need is for these children not to be in school and learning. So I will not be supporting this proposition.
Okay, Ms. Butler.
Okay, well, I know that we need secure borders. We need to know who's coming into our country. We need to, understand who they are and make sure that they're not coming into or bringing drugs or, doing anything here that we don't understand. We need a secure border. The problem with this bill is there are too many problems with this bill. Karen mentioned a lot of them. It is an unfunded mandate, and law enforcement was at the Capitol, and the estimation is that it could cost more than $300 million a year. And there was no money allocated to doing this. And so what this could lead to is law enforcement being, pulled away from other things that they need to be doing and other aspects of their jobs to protect their communities in furtherance of this bill. So it's, the border is a very serious issue, and we need serious solutions and not this kind of thrown together bunch of gimmicks. I wanted to share a story. I was in the legislature and there was a big meeting it was a bipartisan meeting with border sheriffs, and the sheriffs said, what we need is more technology. We need funding for drones and cameras and infrared and materials and personnel. That's what we need funding for. And instead of listening to our border sheriffs like I would have, Governor Ducey, and by the way, our opponent Matt Gruss was his budget, the head of his budget office, they cooked up this idea for the shipping container wall. So instead of funding our border sheriffs with funding, they spent $100 million building a shipping container wall on the border, and it was dangerous, it was falling down. They spent about $75 million taking it down. So that is not a serious solution. And that was, interestingly enough, an election year. It's easy to see a shipping container wall, and it is not so easy to see a drone or an infrared camera. So it's really disappointing when we know that there are serious issues. This is a problem that we need to solve. Actually, it's the federal government's problem to solve, and it's our job at the state level to work with them and make sure that we are hearing from, for example, our border sheriffs, and doing what we can to help those communities stay safe and provide them with the resources they need. I look forward to being in a new majority in the legislature where we can just work with our congressional delegation to sincerely address this issue. And we need to have honest solutions and not election year smoke and mirrors going up. We don't need, it's just become, it's really disappointing because it's a serious issue.
Okay. I do want to get to closing comments, but I have one more question for each of you that I was hoping to ask. Ms. Gresham, before we started, and I think in your opening statement, you said a little bit about some of the gun safety policies that you would like to enact if elected. And I'd like to just give you a little bit of space to talk about that. What are your priorities there? What kind of legislation should we expect you to introduce if elected? Give us a little bit of a view on that.
Yes, thank you so much for this question. It's so important, and it comes up in the news too often lately. But as a parent and a school board member, gun violence has been a major concern for me for many years. And actually, I don't know if everyone saw that the Surgeon General of the United States declared this as a public health crisis. So, and again, we've had many bills run by Democrats for years to enact these common sense gun safety measures, and they can't even get a hearing. But there are measures such as universal background checks, red flag laws, safe storage requirements that I mentioned earlier. And our schools have to deal with not only the social media threats on a regular basis now, and that also puts a strain on our local law enforcement. But we are not immune to this issue here. There's actually, nationally, there's been 105 school shootings just this year so far. And so, and this can happen in Arizona, and it happens at school and in people's homes. And we actually, in our own school district, earlier in the spring, had a first grade student bring a loaded weapon on a school bus, and so this is happening here in our communities. And it could have been a huge tragedy, but our amazing bus driver was able to pull over and secure it and meet the police at school. But the problem with that is that, and of course, we have consequences for the student, for this little first grader. But Arizona, unlike many other states, we have no law that says you have to secure your weapon safely and away from people that shouldn't have them, or including small young children. So. And this is the kind of measures that we need to have. We don't need to be arming teachers or allowing loaded weapons on school campuses. And our opponent has actually voted for multiple bills in the House that make this problem even worse, like legalizing silencers, allowing concealed weapons on college campuses. And this is just the wrong direction. This is absolutely the opposite direction we need to be going. No student should have to worry about being shot at school or a friend's house. And no parent should ever have to worry that their child won't make it home that day. And so these are the kinds of things that we need to do to keep our families and our communities safe.
Okay, thank you. And then, Ms. Butler, for you, different question. You spent 6 years at the Capitol, got one bill signed. Well, I'm sure that you had a long list of priorities, and I would like, if Democrats are able to take the majority at the Capitol, have a Democratic governor for the first time in many years, what would your top priority be? What of those 100+ bills probably over the years would you care the most and put the most energy into getting passed in your first year?
Well, I want to say, I got one. I got one bill signed. I was able to sponsor a few amendments and get them on things. I certainly, I think, held my own in committee to try to do my job, which was, at that time to point out things about the bills that might need to be changed. So I feel like I did work hard and had a lot of results. Sadly, and Christine Marsh talks about this, the Republican majority just won't hear bills if they're sponsored by Democrats, especially in swing districts like ours. But my priority at the legislature, I was thrilled. Many people probably know because I talked about it all the time. Kids Care is a health insurance program for children, low-income families. They can qualify for Kids Care, and I sponsored a bill every year to expand the eligibility so more children could get onto Kids Care and use that quality, affordable health insurance. And the Republicans refused to ever hear my bill. I would try to put it on amendments on a lot of bills, and they never would. But when Governor Hobbs got into office, she did do a Kids Care expansion as part of her budget. And today, I still get goosebumps when I see this. 13,233 children have insurance today that would not have had Governor Hobbs not done that expansion. So I'm going to continue to work on policies that will help ensure that people have access to quality, affordable health care, but also, public education, higher education now with my, experience on the community college board and that workforce development piece, how we can be making sure that we are educating enough of our students to maintain our economy and grow our economy and serve, all of the businesses that are coming here and make sure that we have good jobs available for all of our potential students.
I wanted one priority. You gave them all. Okay, thank you both so much for your time tonight. Let's move on to some closing statements. Anything that we didn't get to tonight that you would like the voters to remember about you or know about you, this is your moment to do it. Ms. Gresham, why don't you kick us off here?
Sure, thanks. We didn't really mention public education funding. We talked about the ESAs, but I've been an advocate for public education for years, even before becoming a school board member. And the children in our state just won't truly be successful unless we take care of our public schools. The vast majority of our students attend public schools, and all of our kids deserve an adequately funded education where we keep students safe, provide high schoolers with secondary opportunities. And actually, one of our opponents, as Kelly mentioned earlier, was the previous governor's budget director for the state. And thanks to the policies implemented during that time, our state now has a $1.3 billion deficit. It's taking away desperately needed funds from not just education, but a lot of other desperately vital services. And we need to restore our public education funding, protect our reproductive rights. We need to enact common sense gun safety measures. And it's just well past time for a change in the leadership at our state legislature. So I will ask you to vote for myself and Kelly Butler both to represent you in the House. And you can find more information on my website. It's Karen4az.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Butler, finish it off.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone who stuck it up in here with us all for this evening, and thanks to Hank. I made the decision to run for a seat in the state house because I am worried about the future of our state if we don't change who's in charge at the legislature. Republicans have been the majority party in the state house since the 1960s, and electing our opponents, Matt Gress and Pamela Carter, will just mean more of the same, a public education system that is last in the nation, out-of-state interests taking our groundwater, and government control of women's health care. When I was in the legislature, I worked to expand access to quality, affordable health care. I was the ranking member on the House Health Committee. I sought transparency and accountability in budget decisions on the Appropriations Committee, and I always fought to support our public schools, students, and teachers. Karen Gresham and I will work together to make sure that our state government works for all of us. And I ask you for your vote. And for more information, you can go to my website, which is kelly4az.com. And again, thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to participate tonight and involve yourself in this process. And thank you to the voters who took the time to watch the debates and inform themselves ahead of the November general election. And we encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. Thank you both so much.